Hello and welcome back to the Dandelion Diaries. This has been a highly requested video, or I guess skill maybe, of how to brush letter, or how to brush letter like me maybe, I'm not really sure. But I wanted to take you through my process of how I learned how to brush letter, and I have 4 materials. I have just a standard gel pen. This is a Pentel Energel. I have a Crayola bold regular marker. I have a Tombow dual brush pen, and then I have a Ridtek sign brush pen. All of these were pretty important for my brush lettering. I will say the sign brush pens aren't the ones that I started with. I started with the Pentel brush pens, but this is just the one I had on hand. So it's the same size tip and everything, and it'll serve the same purpose. But I wanted to take you through how I got started. So first of all, you kind of have to know how to write in cursive. That is a different skill, I would say. I was taught that way when I was a child to write in cursive. My grandparents write in cursive. My mom writes in cursive. It's just something that I grew up with, so I'm used to writing in that sort of script. If you needed to learn to write in cursive, I would say definitely look for handouts on how to do so, but for now, I'll just write out the alphabet in cursive. So starting off, I'm just going to do lowercase. We have A, B, C, and D. These all look very similar to just regular handwriting, so not super exciting there. Same with E. F is a little bit different. G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, and Z. So again, it looks kind of weird, I guess, because it's all broken apart into an alphabet, but I wanted to break down how it would look by itself. Obviously, when you're writing, you would write a full word and then go from there. So we're going to use just the letter A to start with, and I'm going to show you how to write it in a brush letter style using all of the 4 instruments I talked about. And we're going to start with the pen because I feel like everybody has a pen that they can do this with, and it will be a little bit easier to explain. So when you're writing the letter A, you start with a downward stroke, and then you go back up and then back down. So again, downward first, up, and then back down. With that being said, whenever you go downwards, you're going to want to add a thick line. So since we're just using a pen, obviously this doesn't have any kind of flexible nib that will do a bolder side or a skinnier side. It's just going to be one straight size all the way through. With that being said, you're going to go bolder on the downstrokes, leave the upstrokes skinny, and then you're going to go bolder again on the downstrokes. So what I've done here is I've just added that extra line to both of the downstrokes to make it a bolder look. And then you can either leave it blank like that, which I think looks fine, or you can color them in just so it looks like a more brush lettered style, even though you only did it with a pen. So now let's do it with a short word with the letter A. So let's write 8. So the letter 8 looks like this if you were to write it in cursive. And you'll probably notice that I stopped here at the E and then finished the E. That is completely okay to write a letter, stop, pick it up again, stop, pick up the next letter, stop. Like, you don't have to do it all in one go. Obviously, the more you practice, it may become easier to do that, but it's going to be simpler in the beginning to just write one letter at a time, which is exactly how I started. And that's kind of what I'm doing in this video, is this is how I started. So yeah, but I'm going to go ahead and draw those arrows. I have a downstroke, an upstroke, a downstroke, an upstroke, a downstroke, an upstroke, a downstroke, and then an upstroke. So again, it looks kind of funny with it all arrowed out like this, so I'm going to write it again, but you see the process of I'm going down, up, down, up, down, up, down. So yeah, I hope this makes sense. So I'm going to write it again. And now we're going to add in those bolder lines using the pen. So downstroke, we're going to add a bold line here. Upstroke, nothing. Downstroke, we're going to add a bold line here. Upstroke, nothing. Same with downstroke, a bold line. Upstroke, nothing. Upstroke, nothing. Downstroke, something. So with this, it would look like the downstrokes are bold and the upstrokes are skinny, which is how it's supposed to be. And then you can either leave them empty, like with the white space, or you can fill them in like that. Now let's use a brush pen to do this so you can see how it would look a little bit different. When using a brush pen, the tip is really important to determine how big your letters are going to be. So with the smaller brush pens, like the sign brush pens by 𝗦𝘃𝗃 or Pentel, it has a very tiny nib, so it's not going to have a very large line. It's going to be rather skinny, much like this one here. If you were to use something a bit larger, like the 𝗦𝘃𝗃 or Tombow brush pens, you'll see here there's a lot larger of a tip compared to the sign pens. So if you put them next to each other, you will see that you will have a lot more line variation with the bigger nib than with the smaller nib. However, bigger nibs don't necessarily mean a good thing, especially when you're starting out. I would definitely recommend a smaller nibbed brush pen if you're starting out because it's easier to control. And you'll see by control hopefully here in a second once I get started lettering with these. So using the smaller nibbed brush pen, this is the 𝗦𝘃𝗃 sign brush pen, what you're going to do is you're going to hold it at an angle kind of like you would a normal pen, and you're going to apply pressure when you're going down and release the pressure when you're going up. So I'm going to apply pressure when I'm going down, release the pressure when I'm going up. Pressure when I'm going down, release the pressure when I'm going up. And the best way to practice this is honestly with little upwards and downward strokes. And each pen is different, so each pen will have a different kind of need of strength, I guess, to push down to get the line variation. With the skinnier tips, you might need a little bit more pressure than with the larger tips, but you'll just have to practice with each individual type of brush pen that you like to use. But if I were to use this to write the word 8, which is what we're going to do here, I'm going to apply pressure going down, release the pressure going up, apply pressure going down, release the pressure going up, apply pressure going down, release the pressure going up. I'm still going up, so I'm not applying any pressure, and then apply pressure going down to finish off that letter E. For the cross of the T, you can flare it out, do whatever you want, make it a straight line. It really doesn't matter. It's totally up to you, your taste. But that is the basics on how to write a short word with a brush pen. If we were to write it with a fatter tip brush pen, like with the Tombow dual brush pen, this is how it would look. I'm going to apply pressure going down, no pressure going up, pressure going down. So you see it looks really funny because it's all smooshed together. Since this brush tip is so much bigger, I have to make a bigger effort to go out and down with the brush pen. So again, each pen will have a different kind of need depending on the pressure, depending on the nib of the pen, things like that. But for this, it applies a little bit different because the tip is so large. I have to space out my letters a lot more. So same word, 3 different pens, and it looks very different for all 3. Now, I highly recommend when you get started, you use this. And this is, like I said, just a standard Crayola marker. And I will show you why. First of all, they're everywhere. You can get them at any major retail store, Walmart, Target, craft stores, whatever. Crayola tips are super common and they're relatively inexpensive because they are a standard school supply. Since they have a chisel tip, I think is what this is called, it has a point and then a fat side. What you can do here is you can learn how to vary your lines using this tip. So skinny tip, you can go upwards, right? And then fat tip, you go downwards. And you can just do zigzags like this until you get the hang of the marker. Then you can do more of a curved style where you skinny down, down, down. So every time you go down, remember, you want that fat stroke. You want more pressure. You want it to bleed into the paper almost. When you're writing with these, it is really nice because, one, they're incredibly pigmented, and two, when you go back to connect the lines, see, like I missed right there, you can't really tell. So, and with markers, that is something that is common, is when you merge marker lines together, they will create a darker shade. Obviously, it depends on the paper too, but for this purpose, I feel like they do really well for the marker that they are. So highly recommend getting one of these chisel tip Crayola markers and just practice doing squiggles until you get comfortable with the line variation from skinny to fat. If we were to write the letter A with this one, we're going to go down with it being fat, up skinny, and then down with it being fat. And you'll see it looks much different because it is a blockier marker, but it's still the same principle of down you go a fat stroke, up you go a skinny stroke. So down, up, down, up, down, up, up, down. So all of that's still the same. As you can see, since it is a cheaper marker, it doesn't necessarily look as crisp as some of the other ones, but it is a very good way to start out, especially to practice. The next tip I have is going to be using paper that has either dot grid like this, actual grid paper, so like if you wanted to use like a 𝗦𝘂𝗽𝗍, for example, actual grids like this, or you can use lined paper. I don't have any lined paper to show, but anything that has a structured paper look to it. So don't use blank paper like copy printer paper. I feel like when you have letter practice, it's really handy to have a section to work inside of. So let me flip to a new page. So what I mean by that is when you have dots like this, you can basically give yourself this many dots to write in. So let's say I'm writing the letter A again. I need to take up all of this space to write the letter A. And then I can count, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dots. Well, I know the letter T is supposed to be taller than A, so I'm going to add more dots for the letter T. So for letter T, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dots, same height as letter A, and then I have 2 more dots on top of that for the head of the T. And then I can either add the cross right at the letter A, I can add it up, I can add it down, depends on your writing style, what you want it to look at. And then same with letter E, I know that it's going to be the same height as letter A, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dots. And then I have the same height for all of those letters basically. So if I were to take a ruler, this should cover up the whole thing except for the top of the T, which is what it's supposed to look like. This is standard handwriting practice. If you were to get like standard cursive sheets or handwriting sheets, like when you're in elementary, or if you are in elementary, you can use the guiding lines from the top to the bottom to help you figure out how tall or short your letters need to be. This is just if you wanted it to be very neat. Everybody has a different handwriting style, so it just depends. But let's go ahead and do some uppercase letters just so you have an idea of what uppercase would look like in addition to the lowercase. So if we were to do the uppercase in cursive, and I will say there is a lot of freedoms when it comes to the style, when it comes to cursive lettering. So be sure that if you have a specific style that you like, just make sure you're sticking with it, that is your style, or if you want to stick to the standard style, really whatever you want. As long as you can read it, it's what's important. So for my cursive style, I don't usually do a larger letter like this too cursive-y because they're harder to read for me. So I like to do more of a, I guess, flourished print. If you were to do like more traditional cursive, it would not look like this. These would look very different. So that's why I said it's kind of important to identify your style of writing and how you like to write. So for a uppercase letter, if you were to do it in a more cursive style, you can reference the original cursive lettering, or you can kind of make it your own. But for this, I'm going to use the letter G because I feel like it is a harder letter to do than some of the other ones because of its unique shape. And I do like the original cursive letter G, and that's why I have included it here. Q is another one that's a little different. I did my own style of Q, but the traditional cursive Q looks very different from that. But let's do the letter G. So when doing the uppercase letter G, it starts off with an upstroke, and then a downstroke, and then an upstroke, and then kind of a letter J situation, and it crosses over. So with this upstroke being here, we wouldn't do any kind of hard press, right? We're going up. It's going to be a skinny line. But this tiny section here would be a downstroke, so you can add a little bit of boldness here. Then back up to this part, we would be skinny again because we're going up. And then back down, we would be doing a fatter line again because it is a downstroke. Upwards, skinny, and then downwards would be fat. So realistically, this is what it would look like if we were to brush letter it with a fatter tipped marker, just so it would have a more flourished appearance. Now that being said, if you would rather just write the letter G like the letter G and do your own kind of flourishes on it however you want, just note that again, when you're going down, this would need to be thicker, up would be skinnier, sideways I would leave it skinny as well, and then down I would make it thick again. So again, it would just be depending on your style of writing, but this is what it would look like if we were to fill in those two sections with the darker color, since that's what the lines would look like since we're going down here, up and down. So I'll draw my little arrows like I did before. So up, down, up, down, up, and down. So again, it looks kind of funny when you draw the arrows because it's harder to tell, but I think if you're watching as I do this, it's a little bit easier to understand. So this would be up, this would be down, this would be up. Since this is sideways, again, I would not draw any kind of thickness there, and then down would be thickness like normal. You can again decide if you want it to be a thicker line on that slant, but it's entirely up to your preference. So now let's practice with a brush tip marker. So if we're going to go up, we're going to apply no pressure, down, pressure, up, no pressure, down, pressure, up, no pressure, down, pressure. So that's what it would look like with a brush tip marker. And I will do the standard G as well, just so you can kind of see what that would look like. If we were to use, again, the larger tipped brush marker, like the Tombow, up would be skinny, down, down, fat, up, skinny, and down. So with the bigger tipped markers, as you can see, it's harder to control, so you need to make sure that you are leaving yourself enough space. That being said, depending on the type of books you write in, bigger tip may be better, smaller tip may be better. It really is up to your preference. And again, we'll use the Crayola tip because it's the most common out of all of these pens and is very easy to get your hands on. I hope this is helpful. So let's go ahead and do a word starting with the letter G. And I'm just going to use goat because that's the first word that came into my head. So I'm going to write out goat. So this would be the lowercase version. And then if we were to do the uppercase version, notice that I don't connect those two lines. So in traditional cursive, you don't connect the first uppercase letter to the next letter. It would be separate. At least that's how I was taught. If you were taught differently, then maybe I'm wrong, but it's okay. So with this, I'm going to, again, kind of separate out those downstroke lines to where they would be thicker. And when you're using just a pen, it's actually very easy to do this, and I highly recommend using a pen if you just want to get used to the style of how this looks. But if you have a marker already, go ahead and practice with the marker. It will help tremendously in the long run of getting it to look the way you want. I will say that I've practiced several times over years of practice to develop my brush lettering, and I only feel now that it's pretty good. I still think it needs to improve a lot, but I think practice is the only reason that I'm comfortable teaching this because I've practiced so much. But that's what it would look like if we were to put all of it together. So I'll go ahead and write it out with the brush letter marker. So down we're going fat, up we're going skinny, down we're going fat. And then for the O, it kind of crosses over. Again, that standard cursive script really comes in handy when you're writing in a brush lettering style. And I didn't get enough pressure there, so I went back in and I colored in the spot that was supposed to be darker, just to make sure that it had the same look as the rest of letters, and that is entirely okay. Also notice that I am stopping after each letter before I connect them. That is also entirely okay, and honestly is very helpful when writing in this style, because if you were to do it all in one go, sometimes it doesn't end up the way you want. So again, if my letters aren't connected or if I have any spots that aren't really filled in the way I want, I will go back in with that marker and fill in those spots. And I'm not going to do it with the Crayola marker because I kind of run out of space. But I hope this has been somewhat helpful for what it's worth. The last thing that I am going to write is basically today. And I think that's because I write today every single day in my planner. I want to make sure that I have today at the top. So I'm going to use the biggest marker I have so I can make this pretty large and hopefully explain how I write it in my book. So a lot of people will just write it in print and make the downstrokes bold. So like print would be like right, like that would be print version. Every downstroke I apply enough pressure that it's a thicker line, and every upstroke would be skinny and every cross stroke would be skinny. If I were to do it in more of a cursive style, which is what I do on the regular basis, I just make sure my letters are connected, but the same principle applies. Downstrokes are heavy-handed or thick lines, upstrokes are skinny lines and not heavy-handed. And again, if you noticed, I stopped in between letters, and that way I go back in and kind of fill in the gaps where they need to be filled in. Depending on the paper, this will look very different with the marker you use. So this is Erin Condren paper. I think it's like 80-pound paper. I don't remember anymore. But with that being said, it doesn't really show the blending. So it would show like the little spaces where the marker is a little bit more inked up. If you were to use things like the Tomoe paper, you can blend this out a lot more and it won't look as pieced together. It just depends on the type of look you're going for. Also, depending on the color marker, lightness, darkness, anything like that, you will see that the ink will pool in different places. So I'm going to do this again with the Crayola marker here because I feel like, again, this is the best thing you can ever do to start out with, is to start with one of these. So down is always going to be fat and up is always going to be skinny, just for the purposes of brush lettering. So again, if you've practiced this enough times, you will get to a point where you're just muscle memory in the hand on how to do it, and you don't have to worry about necessarily mislettering something. However, I will say it does happen every now and then, so just be forgiving of yourself. It is okay. As you can see with the Crayola marker, it didn't have as much of an inkier spot on an upstroke, which is why you can go back in with the marker and kind of make it a little bit pigmented there. But other than that, it has almost the exact same appearance as a Tombow brush pen. So if you want to get started or you want to practice, highly recommend using Crayola markers. Okay, so this is all I'm basically going to do for this video, because I feel like once you have a good basis of, you know, which letters you're going to be writing in cursive and how to put those letters together, that's a good starting point. So once you have the cursive lettering down, like just writing plainly in cursive, then I feel like you should move on into brush lettering. After that, it's the simple idea of a downstroke being fat and an upstroke being skinny. When you put your words together, you can practice like this with the arrows. You know, every time you have a downstroke, draw an arrow down. Every time you have an upstroke, draw an arrow up. I feel like that really helps too. And then also using the little down ups with the higher pressure going down, lower pressure going up was really helpful for me as well. I hope this video made sense. If this was helpful, please let me know in the comments. If you want me to try to do this in a different way, or if you have anything specific about brush lettering you have, please ask the question down below. I will do my best to answer it, or I may make a whole separate video depending on the question you have. But yeah, I hope this helped. If you're interested in more content from me, I do have an Instagram. I will leave my handle on the screen. But I thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.